My in-laws blamed me for not giving them a grandchild, and my ex-husband, let's call him Jake, sided with them. Even though all my fertility tests came back perfectly normal, they went as far as to call me a broken woman, which cut deeply. So, for some background, I'm 32F, and I was married to Jake, 34M, for 5 years. At the beginning of our marriage, things were pretty good. When we first met, Jake was everything I thought I wanted. Funny, charismatic, and so easy to connect with. I genuinely believed I'd found someone who would stand by me no matter what. But that changed after we tied the knot. His parents, especially his mom, began pushing hard for grandchildren almost immediately after our wedding. It started off innocent enough, with little jokes like, "When are we going to hear the pitter-patter of tiny feet?" But before long, it became an obsession, literally all they could talk about. For context, Jake is their only child, and his parents have always been overbearing. His mom is one of those people who needs to control everything. How Jake should live, who he should marry, and what his future should look like. During our dating years, I didn't realize just how much influence they had over him, but it became painfully obvious after we got married. Jake had this compulsive need to get their approval, especially from his mom, which created a massive strain on our relationship. By the time we'd been married 2 years, their nagging about kids went from irritating to downright intolerable. We had been trying, but nothing was happening. So I decided to see a doctor to check if everything was fine on my end. Thankfully, my tests all came back normal. I felt relieved and optimistic. Naturally, I suggested Jake get tested too, just to rule out any potential issues. That's when everything started falling apart. Jake flat out refused to get tested. He acted like I had questioned his manhood by even suggesting it. He kept insisting there was absolutely no way he could be the problem, and wouldn't even entertain the idea of discussing it further. His stubborn refusal left me feeling so defeated. I just wanted answers so we could move forward, but Jake was stuck in this bizarre, pride-driven denial. It felt like he thought even considering the possibility of infertility was some kind of insult to his masculinity. His reaction only made me feel worse about myself, even though my doctor assured me I wasn't at fault. Meanwhile, Jake's parents refused to back off. Every time we saw them, the conversation would inevitably steer toward when they'd finally get a grandchild. I started dreading family gatherings because I knew I'd have to endure their relentless comments and veiled accusations. I tried explaining that sometimes these things take time, but Jake's mom would just give me this disapproving look, as if to say, "Why aren't you good enough?" Then came the remarks directed straight at me. Things like, "We really hope the problem isn't on your side." My in-laws blamed me for not giving them a grandchild, and my ex-husband, who I'll call Jake, stood by them even though my fertility tests came back normal. They constantly humiliated me, even going so far as to call me a broken woman. For context, I'm 32F, and I was married to Jake, 34M, for 5 years. At the beginning of our relationship, things were really good. Jake was charismatic, funny, and someone I genuinely thought would always be in my corner. But after we got married, everything shifted. Jake's parents, especially his mom, started pressuring us to have kids almost immediately. At first, it was just little jokes like, "So, when's the grandbaby coming?" But before long, it became the only thing they seemed to care about. Jake was their only child, and they had this overbearing, controlling dynamic that I didn't fully grasp when we were dating. His mom, in particular, had this detailed vision of how Jake's life should play out, right down to how he should handle his marriage. What I hadn't realized was how much Jake relied on his parents' approval, especially his mom's. It became clear that he prioritized their opinions over everything else, which caused a lot of strain between us. About 2 years into our marriage, the pressure to have kids went from uncomfortable to unbearable. We had been trying to conceive, but hadn't had any success. Concerned, I decided to get checked out by a doctor to rule out any issues on my end. Thankfully, the tests came back clear, which was a huge relief. Naturally, I suggested that Jake get tested as well, just to make sure everything was okay. That's when things started falling apart. Jake flat out refused to even consider getting tested. He acted as if I had insulted his manhood by suggesting it. He kept repeating that he wasn't the issue, and he completely shut down any discussion about it. I was frustrated and hurt because I just wanted answers so we could figure out what to do next. But Jake wouldn't budge. He seemed to think the mere possibility of an issue on his part was beneath him, which left me feeling helpless. Even though the doctors assured me I was fine, his refusal made me doubt myself. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was still somehow the one to blame. Meanwhile, the relentless comments from Jake's parents only got worse. Every visit turned into an interrogation about when they could expect grandchildren. I started to dread family gatherings because I knew the conversation would inevitably circle back to why we didn't have kids yet. I tried explaining that these things take time and that we were working on it, but Jake's mom would just give me this condescending look, like I was personally letting her down. Eventually, the passive-aggressive remarks shifted into something more direct, with comments like, "I hope you're not the problem here." At one particularly tense family dinner, surrounded by Jake's extended relatives, his mom loudly announced that she hoped I wasn't damaged, wearing this fake look of concern as she said it. The humiliation was unbearable. What hurt the most was Jake's reaction. He didn't defend me. He just laughed nervously and tried to brush it off like it was no big deal. I couldn't believe he didn't stand up for me. When I tried to talk to him about it later, he dismissed my feelings, saying, "That's just how my mom jokes." Leaving Jake wasn't an easy choice, but it turned out to be the best decision I ever made. After walking away from that toxic situation, I stayed with a close friend for a few months while I figured out my next steps. Eventually, I filed for divorce, and surprisingly, the whole process went smoothly. Jake didn't put up a fight, and we quietly ended things. Once everything was finalized, I focused on rebuilding my life from the ground up. I poured my energy into my career, leaned on my supportive circle of friends, and eventually, I met someone who changed everything. My now husband, Sam, 35M. Sam is a breath of fresh air in every sense. He's everything Jake wasn't: patient, kind, communicative, and, most importantly, unwavering in his support for me. We only dated for a year before getting married, but there's a reason for that. We found out I was pregnant. We didn't see the need to wait and tied the knot. Let me tell you, my time with Sam has been worlds better than all those years I spent with Jake. The pregnancy was a dream come true for both of us. After everything I endured during my marriage to Jake, this felt like a second chance, a fresh start. Sam and I were over the moon, and the excitement of preparing for the baby left little room for thoughts of the past. But life has a funny way of circling back. One afternoon, while Sam and I were out shopping, I ran into Jake's parents at the mall. It had been 2 years since I'd seen them, and by this point, I was visibly pregnant. Their reaction? Priceless. They were completely stunned. They tried to mask their shock with polite small talk, but it was obvious they didn't see this coming. I won't lie, a tiny part of me felt vindicated. After all those years of their nasty comments and blaming me for not getting pregnant, there I was, glowing with a baby bump. I kept our interaction short and sweet before saying goodbye. To me, it was just a fleeting moment. I didn't dwell on it. Sam and I had so much going on with the baby's arrival that I didn't have the mental energy to revisit that part of my life. Then, about a week after that mall encounter, the texts and calls from Jake started. At first, I ignored them. I figured his parents had mentioned my pregnancy and marriage, and Jake was just being nosy. But the messages kept coming. Finally, I gave in and read one. Jake was furious. Apparently, after his parents saw me pregnant, they confronted him about why we never had kids during our marriage. And here's the kicker. Jake never corrected them when they assumed I was the problem. In fact, he actively encouraged that narrative. But seeing me pregnant had shattered that illusion. His parents were enraged when they realized Jake had been lying to them for years. They felt betrayed, accusing him of wasting their time and making them believe they'd never have grandchildren because of me, when the reality was likely that Jake had fertility issues all along. The fallout was brutal for Jake. His parents had always planned to leave him a significant inheritance, but after discovering the truth, they cut him off entirely. And who did Jake blame for his life unraveling? Me, of course. He accused me of ruining his life, claiming that if I hadn't paraded my pregnancy in front of his parents, none of this would have happened. According to him, I was responsible for everything. His estranged relationship with his parents, losing the inheritance, and his newfound misery. I couldn't believe Jake was trying to pin all this on me. All I did was move on with my life, and the fact that his lies finally caught up with him has nothing to do with me. I haven't responded to any of his messages, and I don't intend to. I'm in a good place now, and the last thing I need is to get dragged back into his family drama. As far as I'm concerned, Jake brought this all on himself. If he hadn't allowed his parents to treat me so terribly or lied to them about why we couldn't have kids, he wouldn't be in this mess. The guilt he's trying to throw my way isn't mine to carry. Even though I feel pretty sure about this, I ended up talking to a friend yesterday, and I told her everything that had happened. Her reaction caught me off guard. She told me I was wrong for leaving Jake the way I did, and that I should have pushed him harder to get tested. She also said it was petty of me to engage with Jake's parents the way I did. I mean, I can see how it might have looked petty in hindsight. I never intended to hurt Jake, but I'll admit that watching his lies come back to bite him was a little satisfying. That said, my husband, Sam, assured me that what my friend said was nonsense and that I had nothing to feel guilty about. Still, I can't help but wonder if there's a sliver of truth in her words. So, am I the asshole for leaving my ex-husband after his family called me broken? And am I wrong for not feeling guilty about him losing his inheritance? Update 1. Things have gotten a lot more complicated, and I seriously need to get this off my chest. After sharing my original story, I thought that would be the end of it, but I was way off. Jake has been relentlessly blowing up my phone. I blocked his number, so he switched to messaging me on social media. When I blocked him there, he created new accounts just to contact me. He even started calling me from random numbers. At first, his messages were all about blaming me for ruining his relationship with his parents. But as time went on, they got angrier and more desperate. Now he's claiming that I owe him because, according to him, I took away his future. He keeps insisting that if I had stayed with him, none of this would have happened. It's exhausting and honestly feels like he's spiraling. Some people in the comments on my original post sided with my friend and asked why I didn't push harder to get Jake to take the fertility tests. Let me set the record straight. I tried. I tried so hard. Every time I brought it up, Jake completely shut me out. He acted like I'd committed some unforgivable betrayal just by suggesting it. There were days when he wouldn't even speak to me because I mentioned the tests. I did everything I could to stay patient and supportive, but there's only so much you can do when someone is that stubborn. In the end, I realized I couldn't force him to do something he wasn't willing to do, and I had to step back for my own sanity. And for those saying I was petty for flaunting my pregnancy in front of Jake's parents, let me clarify something. That encounter wasn't planned. I was out shopping with Sam, minding my own business, when we ran into them. It wasn't like I sought them out just to rub their faces in it. That said, I won't deny that seeing their shocked reactions felt incredibly satisfying. After everything they put me through, calling me broken, blaming me for their lack of grandchildren, and humiliating me at every opportunity. How could it not? That brief moment was like a little bit of justice for all the pain they caused me. Still, I wasn't trying to hurt Jake or create drama. I just wanted to live my life. Running into them was pure coincidence. A coincidence that, I'll admit, gave my self-esteem a nice little boost. But now Jake has taken things to a completely new and terrifying level. He's no longer just sending messages. He's somehow figured out where I live. I have no idea how he managed to find my address, but the thought of it makes my skin crawl. 2 nights ago, he showed up at my house out of nowhere. He banged on the door for at least 15 minutes, yelling that he needed to talk to me. Thankfully, my husband, Sam, was home at the time. He immediately stepped in and told Jake to leave. Jake refused, insisting that he just needed a chance to explain himself. But Sam wasn't having it. He told Jake in no uncertain terms that if he didn't leave, we'd be calling the police. It wasn't until then that Jake finally backed off, but not without shouting that I had ruined his life. The whole encounter left me shaken. It's hard not to feel like things could escalate further if Jake doesn't get a grip. For those asking how I even found out about Jake losing his inheritance, I didn't hear the full story directly from him, thankfully. I pieced it together from the barrage of angry messages he sent me before I blocked him. From what I can gather, his parents feel deeply betrayed. They were furious when they realized the real reason they never got grandchildren wasn't because of me but most likely because of Jake himself. Apparently, Jake never corrected them when they assumed I was the problem. Instead, he let them believe it for years. And since his parents were so fixated on the idea of having grandchildren, discovering the truth was a deal-breaker for them. They decided that Jake didn't deserve the inheritance they had planned for him. From what I understand, they've now completely cut him off, both financially and emotionally. Jake is absolutely devastated by this, which explains why he's lashing out at me so aggressively. But here's the thing. I don't feel guilty about him losing his inheritance. What was I supposed to do? Stay in a toxic marriage forever just to keep his lies intact? That's not on me. Jake made his choices. He could have been honest with his parents at any point, but instead, he let them treat me like garbage while he stood by and did nothing. So no, I don't feel bad about what happened to him. If anything, it feels like the universe finally gave him a dose of karma. That said, I can't deny that I'm starting to feel nervous. Jake's behavior is becoming more erratic, and it's making me uneasy. Sam and I are already talking about ways to protect ourselves in case Jake shows up again. We've been looking into installing security cameras around the house and are seriously considering filing a restraining order if he doesn't back off soon. I'd love to believe that he'll eventually give up and move on, but something in my gut tells me this isn't over yet. It feels like he's spiraling out of control, and I can't help but wonder what he might try next. So yeah, that's where things stand right now. I genuinely thought this chapter of my life was closed for good, but clearly, Jake has other ideas. I just hope he realizes sooner rather than later that I'm not the source of his problems. All I've done is move on and build a life I'm proud of, a life where I'm happier than I ever was with him. At this point, all I want is to be left alone to enjoy my new chapter with Sam and the baby we're expecting. I'll keep everyone posted if anything else happens, but for now, I'm holding out hope that Jake finally gets the message and backs off. If not, we're fully prepared to involve the authorities and take this to the next level. I really don't want it to come to that, but at this point, who knows? Thank you to everyone who commented on my original post and offered support and advice. Reading your perspectives helped me realize I wasn't crazy for leaving Jake or for feeling how I do now. I'll share another update if there are any developments, but for now, I'm focusing on the future and refusing to let Jake's nonsense pull me back into the past. Update 2. Hey, everyone. I didn't expect to be back with another update so soon, but things have escalated in a way I never could have predicted. After my last post, I honestly thought Jake might finally leave me alone. I mean, showing up at my house seemed like it had to be his final move, right? Wrong. Jake's come up with a new plan, and it's just as absurd as it sounds. After Sam and I made it crystal clear that we didn't want Jake anywhere near us, he started bombarding me with messages again. This time, though, the tone was completely different. Instead of the angry rants and blame-shifting, Jake suddenly started begging me for help. His messages were things like, "I need you to talk to my parents," and "You owe me this." It was such a drastic shift that I couldn't help but feel both confused and morbidly curious about what he was trying to pull. Here's the gist of it. Jake has convinced himself that if I talk to his parents and clear things up, they'll reconsider and give him his inheritance back. He wants me to go to them, tell them this was all just a big misunderstanding, and somehow convince them that he still deserves the fortune they plan to leave him. At first, I thought he had to be joking. I mean, there's no way he actually believes I'd agree to something like that, right? But no, he's completely serious. He genuinely seems to think I can wave some magic wand and make everything go back to how it was before. In one of his messages, he even had the audacity to say, "If you hadn't run into them, they never would have found out, and I'd still be set for life." I couldn't believe the audacity. The fact that he still can't see how his own actions caused this mess is mind-blowing. Jake spent years letting his parents treat me like dirt, lied to them about why we couldn't have kids, and now, somehow, this is my fault? His complete lack of self-awareness isn't just baffling. It's a little scary. It takes an incredible amount of ego to look at a situation like this and think, "Hey, let me call the person I lied about and mistreated for years and ask them to fix everything for me." It's like he's living in a reality where accountability doesn't exist. Anyway, I ignored all of Jake's increasingly unhinged texts, but that only seemed to make him more desperate. In just a few days, His messages went from pleading to outright threatening. He started saying things like, "If you don't help me, I'll make sure everyone knows you're a liar and you'll regret this." It's completely unhinged. He's clearly spiraling and now resorting to threats in a desperate attempt to get his way. The thing is, I'm not scared of Jake. Not anymore. I've been through enough of his manipulative behavior to know that he's mostly just talk. There's no way I'm getting involved in his family drama again, no matter how much he threatens or begs. I've managed to block all his new numbers and accounts for now, but I can't shake this gut feeling that he's not going to stop. He's already shown up at my house once, so what's to keep him from trying again? My husband and I are seriously considering a restraining order, but we're still trying to figure out the best course of action. I don't want to escalate the situation further, but I also can't live like this, constantly looking over my shoulder, wondering if Jake will show up unannounced with more demands or threats. To make matters even worse, I recently found out that Jake's parents have been talking to mutual friends. Apparently, they now think I'm to blame for their family falling apart. According to them, I manipulated Jake into hiding the truth and am the reason they're cutting him off. Honestly, I don't even know where to begin with that level of delusion. It's like everyone in Jake's life is living in denial about who he really is, and somehow, I'm the one stuck in the middle of their warped reality. For now, I'm doing my best to ignore Jake and his parents, but it's exhausting. All I want is to focus on my pregnancy and my life with Sam, but Jake's making it nearly impossible to move on. It's not enough that he's trying to claw his way back into his parents' good graces. He's actively trying to drag me down with him, and I refuse to let that happen. I'm still weighing my options, but I've thought about reaching out to his parents myself, not to help Jake, but to set the record straight. If they want to blame me for their son's lies, that's on them, but I'm not just going to sit back and let them spread false rumors about me. At the same time, I'm worried that opening up any form of contact with them might make things even worse. Right now, it feels like I'm caught in a lose-lose situation. So yeah, that's where things stand. Jake's gone from blaming me to begging me to threatening me, and I honestly have no idea what his next move will be. I just hope he realizes that I'm not going to help him and backs off before this spirals even further out of control. I'll keep you all posted if anything else happens, but for now, I'm just trying to figure out the best way to move forward. Thanks again for all the support. This whole situation has been way more chaotic than I ever imagined, but it's comforting to know I'm not alone in this. And let's be real, knowing Jake, I'll probably have another update soon enough. Update 3. Hey everyone, I've got a mix of bad news and good news to share. The bad news? This will be my final update. I know so many of you have been following my story and checking in on me, and I can't thank you enough for your support. It's been comforting to know that people genuinely care about me and my baby's safety. As for the good news, I can finally say that I'm free of Jake for good. After Jake's last round of begging and threats, my husband Sam and I realized we couldn't keep living like this. We had already been toying with the idea of moving, and with everything going on, it felt like the perfect time to make a fresh start somewhere far away. We found a new place in a completely different state, packed up our lives, and left without telling anyone where we were going. I needed to focus on myself, my baby, and my peace of mind. I was done with all the drama Jake kept dragging me into. But before we left, something happened that still blows my mind. Remember how Jake's parents had been blaming me for everything? Well, it turns out they finally decided to confront Jake directly. I found this out through one of Jake's cousins, who's become a good friend of mine. Apparently, the confrontation was nothing short of explosive. At first, Jake tried to gaslight his parents into believing it was all still my fault. He doubled down on painting me as the villain in an attempt to win their sympathy and, ultimately, get his inheritance back. But his parents weren't buying it this time. They wanted answers about why he was so desperate for their financial support. From their perspective, they had already set him up for life. They'd found him a great job, bought him a house, paid off the mortgage, and helped him build a solid portfolio of investments. Eventually, after relentless questioning, Jake's web of lies unraveled. The truth finally came out. It turns out Jake had been deceiving his parents for years about his finances. While he told them he was saving, working hard, and preparing to take over the family business, the reality was far different. He'd been recklessly blowing through their financial support on things like online gambling and extravagant vacations with his friends. Naturally, his parents were livid when they learned the truth. They felt completely betrayed. Not only did they cut Jake off financially, but they also officially disowned him. They told him they wanted nothing more to do with him and made it clear that the inheritance he was so desperate to recover was gone for good. Initially, Jake's parents had sought advice from their extended family, who suggested they might have been too harsh in cutting him off when they thought it was due to circumstances beyond his control. But when they confronted Jake and uncovered his lies, any chance of reconciliation evaporated. He had manipulated them for years, and now he was paying the price. I honestly have no idea what Jake plans to do next, but I'm just relieved that it's no longer my problem. From what I've heard, he's scrambling to figure out his next move, and frankly, I wish him all the luck in the world with that. After learning everything about how he lied and manipulated not just me but everyone around him, I feel an enormous sense of relief. For years, I thought I was the one who had failed, that maybe I hadn't tried hard enough to fix things with Jake or his family. But now it's clear that Jake was hiding so much more from everyone, not just me. His parents finally saw him for who he truly is, and honestly, it feels like karma has done its job. As for Sam and me, we've settled into our new home in another state, and life has been wonderful. Being far away from Jake and all his drama makes me feel so much safer. We installed security cameras just to be extra cautious, but thankfully, we haven't seen or heard anything from Jake since we moved. We even filed a restraining order before leaving, just to ensure he couldn't follow us or pull any more stunts. It's such a relief to finally know that he can't interfere with our lives anymore. And here's the best part. Jake's parents actually reached out to me. Through the same cousin who told me about their confrontation with Jake, I received a message from them apologizing for how they treated me over the years. They admitted they had no idea Jake had been lying to them and said they deeply regretted the way they acted toward me. I haven't decided if I'll respond to them or not, but it was surprisingly validating to hear them acknowledge the harm they caused. It's wild how much has changed, and I'm finally able to move on without this cloud of drama hanging over my head. Sam and I are so excited about our baby, and it feels amazing to be in such a peaceful place where we can focus on this new chapter in our lives. The past few months have been an emotional roller coaster, but I truly feel like we've come out of it stronger than ever. To everyone who supported me along the way, thank you. Your kind words, advice, and encouragement gave me the strength to keep moving forward, and I can't express how much that meant to me.